In December 2004, in a quiet little town in Missouri, a horrifying crime shattered the peace. A young woman was found dead inside her own home, and the scene left both police and the public in shock. News of the tragedy spread quickly across the United States. The media called it one of the most disturbing cases of the 21st century, but what shocked people the most was the identity of the perpetrator. Not a ruthless serial killer, not a drifter with a violent past, but a woman who seemed on the surface perfectly ordinary. Behind those seemingly gentle eyes lay a dark story, a broken past, and an act so monstrous it forced the world to ask, what can truly turn a human being into a monster? This is the story of Lisa Montgomery, a case that entered American history as a waking nightmare. The past of the devil. To understand why Lisa Montgomery became the center of one of America's most shocking cases, we need to look back at her earliest years. Lisa was not born into a happy home. She came into the world in 1968 in Kansas, inside a small household where chaos and violence were constant. From a very young age, Lisa's childhood was marked by darkness. Her mother, Judy, was known to be volatile, often turning to alcohol and unleashing her anger on her children. Lisa grew up surrounded by yelling, harsh punishments, and the emotional coldness of the very person who was supposed to protect her. But that was not the worst of it. In her teenage years, Lisa became the target of abuse from the man inside her household. In silence, she endured deep wounds, both physical and emotional. No one stepped in. No one protected her. And when she tried to speak up, her own mother threatened her into silence. That pain grew into an emptiness that would follow her for life. As she grew older, Lisa tried to build what looked like a normal life. She got married, had children, divorced, and remarried. On the surface, she appeared like any other woman, a mother, a wife, living quietly within her community. But the truth was very different. Those who knew her described troubling patterns, sometimes withdrawn and silent, other times erupting in anger that seemed impossible to control. Psychologists later concluded that Lisa suffered from severe disorders, long-term trauma, personality disturbances, and delusions that fractured her mind. The scars from her childhood had never healed. They were only hidden beneath a fragile mask. To her neighbors, Lisa Montgomery was just another quiet, slightly unusual woman. But no one imagined that behind this seemingly gentle facade, a dangerous darkness was steadily growing. The day of the crime. December 16, 2004, Skidmore, Missouri. A cold winter morning, the sky heavy with thick gray clouds. The tiny town of just over 300 residents lived with a sense of safety so ingrained that most people didn't even lock their doors. Christmas decorations were being hung, faint lights glowing on porches, the sound of dogs barking echoing in the frosty air. No one could have imagined that on this very day, a nightmare was about to unfold. Lisa Montgomery set out early. Her car rolled slowly along the empty roads, the hum of the engine cutting through the stillness. Outwardly, she appeared calm, just another woman with a gentle face, composed and unremarkable. But behind that exterior was a mind in turmoil. In the trunk of her car lay strange items, silent witnesses to a plan that had been in the making for far too long. Meanwhile, at the end of a quiet street, Bobbie Jo Stinnett was at home. In the small house where she and her husband bred rat terrier dogs, Bobbie, just 23 years old and 8 months pregnant, was filled with anticipation for her first child. She had no reason to suspect that opening her door to someone she knew from an online forum would be anything more than part of her simple, happy routine. When the door opened, Lisa stepped inside, a faint smile on her lips. The two women chatted, their voices blending with the familiar sounds of puppies moving about the room. At first, nothing seemed unusual. They spoke of dogs, of shows, of the little details of everyday life. Yet, had anyone been watching closely, they might have sensed the invisible tension in the air. Lisa's gaze lingered too long on Bobbie Jo's swollen belly. Her tone would drop at times, her eyes drifting away with an unsettling distance. Bobbie noticed none of it. She remained warm, cheerful and trusting, convinced this was nothing more than a friendly visit. As the minutes passed, the conversation faltered. The atmosphere, once relaxed, grew strange, as if the two women occupied entirely different worlds. While Bobbie continued to speak about her dogs, Lisa's mind churned with a single, consuming thought. Outside, Skidmore remained peaceful. Families prepared lunch, pickup trucks moved slowly along Main Street, and no one suspected that only a few houses away, a tragedy was about to be set in motion. Inside that small home, the air grew heavier. Bobbie Jo struggled to resist, but the strength of a woman 8 months pregnant could not match that of an attacker who had come prepared. The once quiet room echoed with broken sounds, struggles, gasps, and then fell into silence. As darkness overtook Bobbie, Lisa began to act on what she had long planned. The scene inside that home was something no resident of Skidmore could ever have imagined. Lisa had transformed her lie of pregnancy into reality by the cruelest means possible. Moments later, and the house was silent once more. Outside, the town remained untouched, calm as ever, but within those walls a life had been stolen and another violently torn into existence. Carrying the infant in her arms, Lisa left the scene, leaving behind a tragedy that would send shivers across America. Discovery and investigation. On the afternoon of December 16, 2004, Skidmore's peace was shattered by a scream from the small home of Bobbie Jo Stinnett. A neighbor, who had stopped by as she often did, stumbled upon a scene of horror. Inside, Bobbie lay motionless on the floor. The room showed signs of chaos, and the sight of her body was beyond comprehension. Her pregnant belly, once a symbol of life, was now disturbingly empty. In shock, the neighbor dialed 911, her voice trembling, nearly incoherent with fear. Police arrived within minutes. It was immediately clear this was no ordinary homicide. The crime scene was too unusual, too brutal. Bobbie's life had been taken, but more than that, the unborn child she carried was missing. News spread rapidly. A young, expectant mother murdered, her baby gone. The story drew instant attention from the community, the media, and federal authorities. The FBI stepped in, recognizing this not only as a homicide, but also as a newborn abduction case. Investigators combed through every clue, phone records, emails, messages exchanged on dog breeding forums. Slowly, a single name began to stand out: Lisa Montgomery. Less than 24 hours later, law enforcement closed in on her home. Lisa appeared at the door, holding a newborn in her arms, calmly insisting the baby was her own. But the evidence told another story. The infant was found alive and returned to Bobbie's grieving family. Lisa, meanwhile, was arrested, her calculated lies collapsing into the grim reality of what she had done. The trial and sentencing. Lisa Montgomery's trial quickly became one of the most closely watched court cases of its time. Standing in the courtroom, the seemingly quiet woman faced the gravest of charges: first-degree murder and the abduction of a newborn. The prosecution argued that this was a calculated crime, meticulously planned in advance. They presented overwhelming evidence: emails exchanged with Bobbie Jo, travel records, testimonies from neighbors and friends. They emphasized that Lisa had pretended to be pregnant for months, setting the stage for a cruel deception. This was not an impulsive act, the prosecutor declared. It was cold, deliberate, and merciless. The defense countered with a very different picture. They described Lisa as a lifelong victim of abuse, sexual, emotional, and physical. They argued that she suffered from severe mental illness, impairing her ability to fully understand the nature of her actions. They pleaded for mercy, insisting that executing a woman so damaged would be punishment beyond justice. The jury listened, but the weight of the crime hung heavy in the air. The murder of Bobbie Jo Stinnett was not just a personal tragedy, it was a scar on an entire community. And after days of arguments, the verdict was delivered. Lisa Montgomery was sentenced to death. The nation reacted with shock. For the first time in decades, a woman was placed on federal death row. The sentence closed the chapter on a crime that horrified the country, but it also ignited intense debates over justice, mental health, and the meaning of true punishment. Life on death row and the execution. After her death sentence was handed down, Lisa Montgomery became the only woman on federal death row. She was housed at the Federal Medical Center in Carswell, Texas, a prison designated for female inmates who required medical or psychiatric care. For years, her attorneys filed appeals, arguing that Lisa's severe mental illness, complex PTSD, personality disorders, and delusions rendered her incapable of fully understanding her actions. They highlighted her traumatic upbringing, sexual abuse by her stepfather, neglect by her mother, and a childhood consumed by violence. Yet the legal system stood firm. The crime was too brutal, too calculated to allow mercy. Behind bars, Lisa lived nearly 2 decades in obscurity. Prison reports described her as withdrawn, often lost in paranoid episodes. And yet, some guards and inmates recalled moments where Lisa showed surprising gentleness, small acts of care, as if another version of her still lingered beneath the surface. In 2020, when the Department of Justice reinstated federal executions after a long hiatus, Lisa's name appeared on the list. The public reaction was divided. One side demanded justice, the other pleaded for clemency, arguing that Lisa was as much a victim of abuse as she was a perpetrator. On January 13, 2021, before dawn, Lisa Montgomery was led into the execution chamber at Terre Haute, Indiana. Dressed in khaki prison garb, she appeared unnervingly calm. She did not resist as the IV lines were secured. Her final words were brief, barely audible, before the lethal injection coursed through her veins. At 7:31 a.m., Lisa Montgomery was pronounced dead. She became the first woman executed by the U.S. federal government in nearly 70 years. Her death did not end the story. Instead, it left behind enduring debates about justice and mercy, about trauma and responsibility, and about the fragile line between victimhood and monstrosity.